So the first step in an interiors project is generally to draw the existing conditions if you don't have them already. And some projects can be quite complicated and the field work can be quite elaborate, in which case you'd probably want to import an image of the sketched floor plan or the egress plan or whatever it is you can come up with to draw your space. Now, in our case, the plan provided in the book is basically a rectangle, a shoebox-shaped space, so it's pretty straightforward. I'll just start by drawing the base shape, which I believe is 15 feet by 30 feet. And that looks about right. And I'll pull that up 12 feet. And there we go. There's the sort of basic volume that we're dealing with. And there is a door and a window in the front. So let's call up the components menu. And I have already called up the architecture menu, the doors section, to save myself a little bit of time here in the video. And I believe we used this framed door, a half door with a double panel. So I'll just click on that to place it. And most components you'll find should go right in. One trick to notice, two tricks actually. One is if you click on the image, it will bring up the insert menu immediately. And you can just place the door, and I like to get it right there on the ground. See how it kind of snaps to the ground? Makes it easier to place. If you want more information about the door, just click on the sort of blue underlined hyperlink, and that will bring up more information, including a 3D model, others that are similar, and who might have created the model. Then you can download the model right into your SketchUp project. I'm going to go to the in model section here, and I've already downloaded the window, so I'll bring that guy in also. And it is a good idea if you have a bunch of components that you know you're going to bring into the project to bring them in all at once. Just like for the next step, positioning the window and the door, if you know you're going to be drawing a bunch of reference lines, might as well draw them all at once while the tool is active. It saves you a few clicks, which over the course of a lifetime, well, might add up to about 30 seconds. But anyway, I'm going to draw my reference line here, which is 51 inches off the edge. And let's see, there's a reference line for the bottom of the window, 2'5" off the ground. And then I'll show you a little trick for moving the window that I didn't talk about in the book. So when moving these objects, again, you're going to want to make use of the reference lines, but also the geometric snapping points, O-snaps in AutoCAD speak. So I'm going to use the midpoint in this component. I want to force it to stay in the red direction to lock that inference because I've already placed this door on the ground. And then I can just a matter of dragging my mouse over the reference line that I drew. Okay. With these windows, the same thing. I want it to move up and down, so I have to select the window first and then move it. And again, once it's going in the blue direction, I just lock that inference until it hits the reference line. Now, one little trick is you don't always have to draw a reference line. I'll just move this window over to the edge of the project, and if I know the distance off of the side wall, then I can just move it over, and I believe that was about 16 inches, so I can just type in 16 and enter. So you don't always have to have a reference line. In fact, I could have moved this into the corner of the building and copied it, or moved it that way. Anyway, and oh, there are two of these windows, so let me make a copy. And again, using the move copy command, it's helpful to lock that inference so you don't get off. And it is very important because it can be easy to get off even by just a little. And that does sometimes add up to a lot of misery later on in your project. Now, one thing that I did not mention in the book, I sort of jump in, I believe it's page 83, into the description of how to add the wall thickness to this lovely existing conditions. But I mentioned saving a scene, but I didn't actually say how to do that. And it's under the View pull-down menu, under the Animation grouping. There's an Add a Scene section. So that's how you do it. And you can right-click on it and rename it and call it Overview if you so desire. Okay, so there we go. I have a scene which I can quickly return to. Oh, I think I need a door in the back of this building too. So let's just copy and paste the door into the back of the building. There we have a complete project. And slide that guy over. To make the thickness of the walls, it's fairly straightforward, and I will show you the method that I tend to use, but or that I use. But it is obviously, there are millions of different ways to do this. I could use push-pull around all the sides. It kind of depends on the shape of the room that I'm using. And a lot of people will draw the floor plan view and then extrude the floor plan view. I'm kind of doing it the opposite way, just by offsetting the roof about 12 inches. And then I'm going to push-pull this center surface, and sometimes you have to select it if you don't get the right one. Push-pull it, but if I move my mouse down until I get the end point, I can use either end point, what will happen is it will push-pull all the way through and create a hollow volume. Basically, you can see off into space there. Okay, and so that creates a basically a hollow space. I can add back in the floor if I want, just by drawing a line over any of these four edges here, and it will draw the space back in. Okay, so there's my floor. I can also draw in the ceiling in the same way. Okay, now how do I get floor and wall thickness? Floor and ceiling thickness? Well, it's pretty similar. You can, and again, there's a number of different ways that you can do this, but the way that I like to do it is I push-pull the floor surface down 12 inches or so, and obviously it would be nice to know the exact dimensions, so we are just kind of estimating here. And then I just push-pull the edges, and there we go. And I do the same for the ceiling. Okay, push-pull it up. I'll give it 12 inches. And I make reference to the faces on either side, or I could use endpoints as well, so that the whole thing aligns nice and neatly. Okay, and there we go. So the interior surfaces that I just created are actually blocking the windows here. I can't see inside the building, by which I mean, here, let me draw a rectangle up above the door and push-pull it in 12 inches. And you should be able to see inside the model. Now, we, of course, can't see inside the model because we have drawn the interior wall. But what you can do, you can make these little openings and just use push-pull to drag them down to be the width and height of your door. And again, I'll just use push-pull, and then I can use points on the door as references to snap these openings. Okay, and it is a much easier way to do it this way when you draw the rectangle off of the surface. And then click the openings as such. Okay. And in this case, there are some window frames that are interior to the object here, which we should make reference to. And that is basically how you draw your existing conditions. So to add a scene here of the interior, what we're going to want to do is actually zoom in through the door or the window. Doesn't really matter which one. It is kind of weird because you have to kind of smash through the window to get there. But eventually we get there, and that is a view of our interior. And we can use orbit to look around and kind of pan around. Oh, and it does look like I've lost my floors somewhere along the line. If I have, I can just draw those back in using the line tool. And it's not a terribly exciting space as yet, but that will certainly change as we continue to modify the model. And that is how you create your interior scene. So space planning in SketchUp is really one of the kind of best uses of the program. And the reason is because of the vast library of components that are available for use in SketchUp. And they're mostly free, although there certainly are paid ones. And they're very easy to manipulate in the views. So let's take a look at a couple of them. So first of all, out of the box from SketchUp, there are a number of different options here in the kind of pull down or fly down menu, however you want to call it. By default, it shows you the components that are in the model. You may also have your own collections. There is a components sampler, which has a number of pretty common ones. Including scale figures. And then there are some architectural ones, which are quite nice for what we tend to do. Obviously, you do need to be on the internet for these to work. But what you can see, there's really all sorts of terrific things out there, foosball games, countertop blenders. I mean, you can really put everything that would go in a project there. And what I'm going to show you, first of all, I'll take a look at what's called a dynamic component, DC component, that's what it stands for, dynamic component. There are quite a few of these out there in the 3D warehouse and here available via search. Let's take a look, let's grab this one here, the base cabinet with 2 drawers. And what that is, it's basically a cabinet with the possibility for end panels, and you can control the width of the component. And so I'll just stick this in here, and I'll put it in my plan. And here, let's go to the view to back so that we can see what it looks like. Okay, you see it's not really all that exciting, but one feature that it has that's quite nice is if I right-click on the component and choose Dynamic Components from the context menu, and then Component Options, these dynamic components have a very nice feature where, for example, I could change the width and I can make it have finished end caps, for example. You see how the component immediately shrinks to fit whatever size I've told it. I don't need to do any further manipulation. So, for example, if I let me close this here and I'll move this into the corner. I suppose I could probably measure how big this needs to be, but I'll just make a copy of this guy. We'll drag it on along over here. And I can make the copy something entirely different, which again, it's just a little bit of a time saver. You could absolutely use things like the stretch command to achieve the same results. But you can see how pretty quickly I can get fairly close to what I need for this particular location. Maybe I'll leave this a little bit short. For accessibility at the door. Okay, so there you go. So that's a very basic way to put in some components that have some flexibility to them. Otherwise, you can absolutely search in this menu, and this accesses the 3D warehouse. And some people prefer to just do it in this menu. Here, we'll go here to the cafe seating, see what they've got. Some people prefer to go through the full-on 3D warehouse dialog, which is obviously quite nice. Anyway, we can keep on going and digging through and finding components. I really just need a chair. So I think I'll use this chair here. I just like the look of it. And I'll put it off to the side here just to give me a little bit of space to show you some of the options. It is nice when the model is kind of unencumbered. So basically, here we are. I have this component. First of all, when you click on the Move command, I usually tap the M button with my right hand. There are certain basic grips. Obviously, I can click on the ground to move it left or right. If I click on the object, be aware that sometimes you can accidentally drag that chair vertically. It's going to be quite difficult to see sometimes if you've done that. So I recommend if you're just moving it along the ground, don't click on the object. Click on the ground. Anyway, these grips up here, the little plus signs, are rotate grips. And those are really nice to make kind of little subtle changes. There is a snapping which happens. I believe my snap is set to every 15 degrees. So that's a basic way that you can modify the chair. Now, if I just want some straight rows, for example, I can use my Move command and tap Control or Alt on a Mac. And you see how there's this little plus sign next to my cursor. That indicates that I'm going to be making copies. And if I want a straight row, it's really important to use your axes. See how I'm getting the red axis tooltip. And I can move my mouse over, and of course I have a readout of the distance over here. But what I often do when I'm spacing seating is I have some distance in mind, say 20 inches. Okay. A little more precise, and you can actually look up recommended spacing for different types of seating configurations. Anyway, there are several modifiers. If I type in the letter X and some number, say 10, it will give me 10 copies of that chair. Let's say I decide, oh wait, I only want 7. I can type in X7, and as long as I haven't activated any other command, I can modify this array that I've just created. So let's say I change it to 6, but maybe I want them to be 24 inches apart. Okay. Now, as soon as I activate another command, it can be any command at all. Now X7, whatever, it doesn't do anything. Okay, and I cannot come back in. These are all individual components. I can't come back in and change the spacing later on. However, I can make a second array, and what I like to do is, if I know I'm going to have a lot of rows that are basically the same in terms of number of chairs, I'll create a component of the component, call it row of chairs, and now when I make my kind of array of the array, let's say these are 3 feet apart, and I can make 6 rows, and there we go. Oh wait, I'd like a little more spacing. That's a little cramped. I can make it. What did I say? 3 feet, 3 foot 6. Okay. So there are quite a few features that are very nice. Now, let's say you want to just fill. Whoops, don't want to delete them all. Let's say you wanted to fill your plan with these chairs, but you actually don't know what spacing is going to work. Another option is when you have the Move command and you've made your copy, start at one end of the array and move your second copy to the end of where you think the array should go, and then use the modifier slash and say some number. When I type in /5 and enter, it will give me 5 copies evenly spaced from the first one. And if I don't like it, if I want more of them, I can do /6 or /4, depending on the spacing that I want. So that is another way to do an array. Okay. Now, let's say we want an array. I'm just going to explode this. but we want it to be curving. Maybe we want a little bit of an arc to the seats. Now maybe I'll move this into the plan to get a better sense of exactly how much space I have for my array. I'll move this guy over to the corner, and I'll use my rotate tool to kind of point it towards the middle. And what I can do is use the rotate command. However, I can use the rotate command and tap the Alt. Once again, I have the little plus sign that I can use to rotate rotate and copy. This time, I'm going to plant the center of my rotation here off in the edge of the plan. I think it'll just look a little nicer. Now, I can drag make the copy off at some angle on the opposite side of the room, and I'll use that slash modifier to create a series of copies right in between. And you see how SketchUp interpolates the angle from the first to the last. That might be too many. There we go. And there we go. Now I have an arcing array, and I can do the same thing that I did before. Make a component out of this curved row. Oops. And then move copy the row, so I can get multiple arrays of my array. That's probably need a few more. There we go. So that's a very quick way to set up some basic space planning, finding the components you like, experimenting with different types of arrangements, taking advantage of dynamic components if possible, and if not, hunting around for components, either using the components browser or by using the full-on 3D warehouse. Again, the 3D warehouse gives you more information and a kind of bigger interface, and this is nice if you have multiple monitors. You can leave this up. So the last thing is that I'm going to call up my layers menu, and let's say I have a lovely design option here, but I want to show one with curves, and we'll just copy this and paste it in here. But I want to have a second option that has straight chairs. What I can do is I can explode this, and I'll just save one of these chairs here. I don't need them all. And I can change the layer of this to option 2. You'll see it actually disappears. But now I can, let me just put this back into floor plan view. I can add a scene, and I'll rename this scene option 1 plan. And now I'm going to make my current layer option 2 and turn off option 1. And I'm going to add a new scene, which I will call option 2 plan. And what's nice about that, I can come in and I'll just move my chair over here, and we'll straighten it out just a hair, make some copies. And I can pretty quickly generate two options for my plan. Now you'll notice that anything that was on that original option 1 layer will not show up. So if I decide to use the same kind of cabinets, I will have to copy them from option 1 into option 2. Anyway, this allows me, see how I can quickly switch from one option to the other, which is awfully nice if you're sort of comparing or you're copying different elements. Let's say I want to keep these, but I want them to be part of option 2 as well. I just have to copy those two cabinets, put them on the correct layer, and now I could move these into place. You know, maybe I want to rotate them and move them into the corner. And maybe I don't want this guy, I don't know. Anyway, there are so many different ways to accomplish space planning that it's really a multifaceted and multi-option sort of thing. But that's the basics of how you would create different options. Obviously, I would come up with another one, option 3, and again, being careful to make sure that I have the ones I expect on each layer. The final piece of this is if I have perspective views already created, which I have. First of all, now I've put furniture in. This is kind of an interesting view, but maybe not the view that is going to look nearly as good. So maybe the time has come to change this original view. Maybe I want to look down from above or something like that. So I can update this, but what I should do is make sure it's absolutely clear that this is view to back option 1. And of course, when you do this, you start to get some very long names, so you might develop a shorthand for these. And it's quite easy to go to your Layers menu, take this option 1 view, and turn on and off the different options. And we'll just add a new scene, and now we have a scene for back, option 2. Okay. Again, you're just trying to help yourself to create a better design and help your clients to understand what you're doing. Well, sometimes in the course of a project, it's necessary to take one element and you just can't find a component ready-made out there that works for you. You have to create your own custom object. And what I have in my project here, I have this kind of serving area that I laid out, but I really just blocked it in. I mean, literally, these are kind of extruded boxes because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it yet. And I didn't want to slow down the design process. But now the time has come to really change what this design is. Now I absolutely could double click on the component and make sure that the rest of the model is hidden. But what I like to do is actually work on this in its own separate component outside of the model. It just makes it a lot easier to see all the parts of it. Also, as you'll see when we go to put together design drawings, it also makes it easier. So the way to do this is you right click on the component that is in question that you want to edit somewhere, and you can choose Save As. And this allows you to save the object outside of your project. And I'm just going to put it here on my desktop. And then you can open that right up. And here it is all alone in my project. Now, another thing before we get started here, a thing that you can do to make your workspace a little more efficient, especially now that you have become more familiar with these tools and toolbars, is you can go and enter the full screen mode. It's down here at the bottom of the View menu. And it just, again, it gives you a little bit of extra space. I can still access these menus up at the top of my screen, the pull-down menus, but I don't need them really anymore now that I'm more familiar with the commands. So doing a custom countertop, obviously this is a design exercise. You'll need to think about the functionality of the space. And of course, the one thing that we have lost is any relationship to the existing conditions. So we're going to have to try to remember what was there. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to give myself a little space over here so that I can have a pass-through for the people working behind the counter. I'm going to add a kick space at the base of this desk here, service counter. So the way that you can do that, and again, there's many different ways to do it, but I like having it here on its own. I can offset the kick space. It's usually about 3 inches. And we'll push-pull it up. Let me just zoom in. If you have a surface selected already, by the way, and you go to push-pull, it will push-pull that surface. Anyway, I believe it's about 4 inches is the kick space. And I could absolutely have a countertop. Usually there's one part of the counter that's a little bit lower that is for handicap access. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this part of the counter and push-pull it down 6 inches. Now that's at 30 inches. But I'm going to raise this up about 6 inches. So this is more of a standing height, which is more typical. 40, even 48 inches is possible for a service counter where people are kind of walking up and standing for service. Other things that we can do, so now that I have kind of the general configuration set, I can draw in countertop. Now, in this case of this section, I think I'm going to just have a small service area up here and drop the counter down a little lower. There's a couple ways that you can do that. I find that one of the easiest ways, and again, there's just so many ways to skin a cat, so to speak. That's an odd expression, isn't it? Well, anyway, no cats here. No cats were injured in the production of this video. I'm going to just draw the profile along the edge here and push-pull it down. And that way I can really think about what my countertop is going to look like. So first of all, I'm going to select this line. I'll use the Move command and tap Alt or Control on a PC. And I'll copy it down, and I'm going to go with a 30-inch countertop, but my service counter part is up at 42, so I want to move this down 12. And again, I'm just trying to demonstrate possible techniques for how you could do this. And what I think I'll do, I'm going to take this edge line, and I'll copy it over about 5 inches. And that'll be the edge of my counter. And I can even copy the countertop here, although I think I'm just going to wing it and give myself a little profile for the top of the counter. Erase that. So you can see I'm starting to get a sense of what this guy might look like from the end. And now I can just push-pull this all the way down to the edge. Now, you usually have a little bit of an edge to your countertop, kind of a profile or edge detail. I think I'll add one of those in. I'll just draw some lines. And again, you can type in dimensions. In this case, I think I'm just going to eye it. Not sure yet what the material is, so maybe I'll be a little cagey. That's a little harsh. Maybe let's add a little bevel to it. There we go. Maybe I'll add one down at the bottom too. Make this thing extra fancy. Erase those little extra pieces. And now I can push-pull this puppy, push-pull this puppy down to the end. Okay. Again, you always make reference to the end points when you reach the opposite end. Oh, except I guess apparently I didn't do that. We need to push-pull this all the way down. Now you see how when I do that, when you push-pull from one surface all the way to the other end of that volume, it will, in fact, erase the volume. Okay, and this is a great way if you want to make a hole through something. So for example, this service counter here, I think I'm just going to have underneath it some open storage. I can come in here, if I draw a rectangle, or better yet, let's even just use offset. And I can, oh well, that's actually probably a little bit much. Let's have a shelf in the middle. There we go. Little bit of a shelf. Now, when we push-pull, if I push-pull and make reference to this opposite end, it will cut a hole right through it. But be aware, if you push-pull and make reference to that opposite end, you will cut a hole through it. So sometimes you don't want to do that. You really have to just be aware of what you're doing. And I'll add some little detail to this, pull the shelf in ever so slightly. I wanted to pull the shelf in ever so slightly on this side, but you see how it wouldn't do it. If it's not, you need to draw in whatever geometry is going to divide up the surface. And in this case, I just added in some lines, and now I can push-pull that. There are all sorts of other details that you could add. I could have rounded the corner and have an overhang here on this edge of my countertop. I could make this come out ever so slightly. And these little details, these are actually super nice if you are wanting to really get into the details of your project. I can add that same detail up here. Now, what if I wanted to copy this profile up to this countertop? Well, what I'd need to do is get to a point where I can copy the profile. And you need to draw in a line somewhere along the line. Somewhere along the line. That was an unintended pun. So that you can copy that profile. I'm just going to double click on it, select it. And here is where you can use the System Control-C and then go up to this upper profile and use Control-V. Now the trick is going to be getting it to the spot that you want. I'll just put it right there. So I can use push-pull, but click on the little tiny bevel, And as long as I can get to that end point way down in the distance, and again, I'm using my perspective view to help me out. Now I can erase that little piece. And there you go. You have a matching profile. I suppose I could do it on the opposite end too. And again, it's all about trying to get the detail level that you want in your project so that it really seems like a lived-in kind of space. Also, it's just kind of a challenge as a designer to really think through all of these different pieces. So that's some of the basic parts of this. There are other things that you could do. For example, if you wanted to have doors. Now, I would only recommend spending a lot of time on the back of this counter if you think you're going to see it in your project. So for example, the countertop, I'm definitely going to see. And in fact, I just realized I don't have a countertop here, so I should put one on there. You're definitely going to see that. You're going to see the service counter. The cabinets, maybe not so much. One quick way to do doors is draw in a door, and you could probably look online and find some doors. Now what I will do in this case, I'm going to double click on the door, and I'm going to make it a component. And we'll just call it door. Well, let's call it cabinet door, so I know what it is. And double click on this to edit it, but display the rest of the model. And you can pull it out a little bit, and we can even add a little bit of a profile as long as we're here. Just pull this in and this in a little bit. There you go. Beautiful. You know, I could even add in detail for my handle if I wanted to. Let's just put a little kind of knob on there. Beautiful knob. We can pull out the circle. We can try to pull out the circle. And in fact, you can even, with SketchUp objects, some objects, if you get their entity info, some objects can actually be changed kind of parametrically. So if I change this dimension of the radius, change that to 0.5 inches, you can actually make kind of a wedge shape. Not all objects can be changed in this manner, okay? And I can't change the number of segments. I can when I've first drawn the object. I can make a copy of this using my move copy command. And typically, the knobs are kind of together. You have pairs of doors that are two. So what I want to do is make this door mirrored. Well, one way to do that is, or really the only way to do that, is to right-click on it and choose Flip Along, Components Red. Now, how do I know that it's red? Well, usually what I do is I try every other option, and they're all wrong until I get the right one. In theory, it's the axis that is kind of along the I don't know, the meridian that you want to flip, but that never really makes a whole lot of sense. Now that I have these components, so now I'll take this and I'll make a copy. In this case, I'll use the move copy command, tap Alt on a Mac, Shift on or Control on PC. Now I don't know how many doors I need, so I'm just going to tap /5. Let's try /6. It looks pretty good. So there you go. We have the back of our project pretty easily created. Obviously, I can put doors or open cabinets in other places. One other fun thing that we can do, let me just close this menu, is we can put logo on this front desk. SketchUp has a cool tool called 3D text. And what this will allow you to do is, you guessed it, place text that is three-dimensional, that kind of sticks out from the wall. You can even change the font, but let's give it a name, Ralph's Greek Temple Coffee. You can give the text any custom thing. You can specify the dimension and how far out it's extruded and whether or not the extrusion is full. So let's change the font. Regular is fine, but let's make it a little taller, 14 inches. And now click place. And what you'll see is, lo and behold, our text shows up as a three-dimensional object. And these are objects which can be scaled, they can be stretched and rotated and painted, and you can fiddle around with them afterwards. The only thing that you can't do is change the text once it's entered. So if you've made a spelling error or something like that, or you just choose a different name for your project, then you are basic. So I'm not going to continue and finish every little corner of this piece that would make my video hours long, but you would want to finish painting the entire object, push-pulling, follow me, whatever it is that will take you to get all of your countertops, cabinets, signage, materials, all that kind of stuff. Now, to prepare it to be reinserted in the model, you really don't need to do anything other than save it. I'm going to do Command S or Control S on a PC to save. What I would like to do, though, is prepare it for putting together our set of drawings. And to do that, you'll want to save a couple of scenes of this project, of this object, in order to be more easily inserted onto a sheet of drawings. We've learned this before. You go to the Window pull-down menu, you call up your Scenes menu. I usually have the Styles menu open at the same time, and I'm pretty much done drawing, so I'm going to leave them both open at the same time, just for convenience. And what I'm going to do, let's choose to save this overview here. This is a fast drawing mode, and so it's easiest for when you want to make modifications. Click Add. Okay, and we'll just call it Overview. This is handy if I want to come back and do something. But like we learned before, there are other types of styles out there. So for example, let's go with some of these sketchy edges one. And I'm going to display them. Right now they're displaying as a list. I'm going to display them as large thumbnails so you can really see what they look like. You can see there are a number of different kinds of views. These are all kind of sketchy looking. And of course, remember, we are using SketchUp, so having things look sketchy is kind of the goal. Each of these slightly different look, as you can see, so you'll want to choose one that kind of makes your project look nice. I'm going to save this. You can see it's turned off the axes and other things. And I'm going to save an overview here, but this one, I'm going to call it Sketchy. I also would like to save a plan view and an elevation of the two front sides. I think I'd also like to put a scale figure in here. I totally forgot to do that. So in my 3D warehouse, obviously what you type makes a big difference. I'm going to type in person, and you get, oh, hey, that's the person who's in my model already. You can use these people, of course, download them right into your model. And I've placed that person here and also a silhouette person. Let me move him over. And if you type in silhouette and person, you'll end up with a bunch of people like that. A lot of them do what's called face the camera. You see how as I move the camera, they always look at the camera. And that's actually a nice feature for scale figures. One thing you'll notice, though, is that here I am in my overview. If I go to the sketchy view, you see how the scale figure that was the silhouette, it basically doesn't show up in this particular view. It's just how the system processes that view. It's probably so like a cooking show, I'm not going to show you every step between here and there because we've already learned this in a previous video, how to set up orthographic views and perspective views. And just as a reminder, obviously the sketchy views are fine as saved ones, but if you want something like an elevation, I'll just click on this elevation. As a reminder, we're going to have a different style for these orthographic views. I use a style here called for board. And as a reminder, again, I'm going to set up the view types, the view properties here, style properties, to show a number of features that I happen to like. For example, endpoints. I think it just looks nice on a design board. And there are other things you can do. You can display front or back color. What I use is a face style, which is just black and white. And it still looks good, but it doesn't distract with all the colors. You can have sky or ground, and you can also control the thickness of things like the section cut. I did set up a section view looking left, and you can see here that I use a different style for that one that has section fill checked, and I've chosen a color which I think looks nice. And you can crank up the section cut line also. There are a few other little tweaky things you can do to your view to create some interesting effects. One that I happen to like is this dashed line feature, which is relatively new to SketchUp. And the way that you achieve that, you go to your Layers menu, and you can create a new layer. And again, creating a new layer is just a matter of clicking the plus sign, and you can call it whatever you want. Dotty, doesn't really matter. But now there are different line types available. So all you have to do is choose the line type. Any object which is placed on that layer will have that property to it. So that's a quick way to have line types in your project. Another fun thing that you can do is in a view where, let's say you want to show the back edges of a project, you can do that just under the View pull-down menu. Under Edge Style, you can show the back edges. I'll just turn it off, and you can see they disappear. So once you have all these scenes saved, don't forget to save your component model, and then you'll want to go back into your main model where you have the proxy object that you set up. So once you have all your different views saved, by all means hit save for your component and then go back to the main model.